me $10 million and then fire me after the first year, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if it's like a 4-year deal and it's all back in. It's you still got to pay me. What's in store for John Fossil? Obviously, you know his father well, as do I. But he was a special teams coach. He's very unassuming, and having known him for as long as I've known him, what's going to be in store for him on a Thursday night game in Seattle?
Well, John coached me in Baltimore. He is a great coach. He's a great young coach, and I think he's a coach that at some point would be worthy of talking to as a true head coach. We've talked about it many times. Special teams coaches are kind of an untapped resource when it comes to tabbing guys as a head coach. Now, John, obviously, this is a tough circumstance. They did the right thing in making him the head coach because his enthusiasm, the way the players relate to him, you just got to keep the players engaged and enthusiastic. This is a tough situation. They're not a good football team, but they got to play out the strings, so to speak. And John's the kind of guy that they'll respond to do just that.
Brian, I'm going to ask you, I think this might be a little tough because I want you to be specific and identify, and I know you're outspoken enough to give us a few names here, but I don't think it's an easy question, and I am curious how you answer this. I think a lot of times fans, when the coaching process begins of hiring a new coach, I think a lot of times fans kind of focus too much on the individual being brought in and not the upper structure, above them, the hierarchy, the foundation of the franchise. And I'm a Jets fan, and there's a reason why the Jets always seem to take a step forward and 5 back. It's because there's nobody below Woody that knows football that can direct him properly in the right position. Give us a few teams, and I would imagine the Rams are one of them, where there's just an absence of, and the 49ers are on that list as well, an absence of intelligent, cohesive front offices that lead to the same mistakes year after year.
Well, that's a good question. When you look at the winning teams, the consistently winning teams in this league, whether it be the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, what has been the Green Bay Packers, I think you have to look in Seattle. New England and Bill Belichick is kind of its own category, so to speak, in the way things are done. First off, there's no one absolute right way to do it. This has become a general manager's league to a large degree. But clearly the relationship and the structure between the head coach and the general manager has to be very clearly defined, and it has to be one of mutual respect with a shared vision for what's going forward. Too often we put them at odds with one another. And it's, the coach has to hire the GM has to hire the coach. And there's a lot that goes into it. But I think when you look at the teams that are continually hiring and rehiring coaches, obviously they struggle to get that formula just right. Now, I just wrote about this last week. I think we have seen teams become more patient for any number of reasons, and sticking with when you see what Gus Bradley, even with a Jeff Fisher in with the Rams, whether it be St. Louis or L.A. In the day, there would have been even those jobs would have turned over quicker than they did.
Yeah,
and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
that we're showing a little bit of a patience, but that. It is a unique relationship, and what the order is and what that structure is, it can be different with each team, but you have to recognize that relationship exists, and it has to be kind of brought in lockstep, as opposed to this guy hires that guy hires this guy, and you need to tie them at the hip together. You see a lot of clubs doing that recently, whether it be in Indianapolis, for good or bad, to do away with that white noise of this guy's against that guy. Grigson and Pagano, ownership says, hey, I'm extending both of you, and you're both together, and if one goes down, so does the other. I think that's a good place to be.
But specific to, say, the Jets and the Niners, you agree with my assertion that it's deeper than just the head coach. It's more systemic issue, right?
Oh, absolutely. And
okay.
The Niners, Trent Baalke, when you had the force of personality of Jim Harbaugh, and then what they sought out to be their coach, was, okay, I just give me a guy that can draw up game plans and I can dictate to.
Yeah.
And that didn't work, okay? And then you bring in a Chip Kelly, and now that's a totally different direction. That marriage you knew from the get-go. That's going to be the challenge for the 49ers right now, is as they go forward, if obviously it's likely you're going to make a change to general manager. Well, do you make a change with Chip Kelly? Because if you stay with Chip Kelly, and I'm not advocating, I never advocate for a coach being fired, but you're committed to a style going forward, and whoever the general manager is that says we're going to recraft this in the vision of what Chip Kelly wants, which is a dramatically different vision what the rest of the NFL does. So if you want to do that, that's great. But you got to understand you're doing that going in. In terms of the New York Jets, and I don't know that relationship in terms of what that is. They've obviously been through that in terms of a different and being a little bit a part of that search before Todd Bowles and what they drew him to Todd Bowles and then the general manager. I think you've got to look real hard at what combination are we going to put in here, and it's not just coaching. The personnel and the shared vision, and they see it. They don't have to agree on everything. You want them to argue a little bit. We used to call it scrimmaging, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to have that shared vision for what you're looking for.
Good stuff, Brian. Brian Billick with us here, of course, Super Bowl champ with the Ravens, head coach, NFL Network analyst here on Tiki and Tierney.
You know, the Jets, Brian, have drafted a quarterback each of the last 4 years, and now the report is that they're high on Mitch Trubisky, the kid from North Carolina, and, they could take another quarterback again. Now, look, you won a Super Bowl, and, unfortunately, against my Giants, with a quarterback, Trent Dilfer, who wasn't a world beater. He was good and great guy. I think great one for what you needed him to do. But when did it become so important for teams to find that franchise guy? And when they can't, doesn't it hamper a program? I mean, for years it seems like, because the Browns are in the same exact situation.
Oh yeah, you got to get the quarterback position right, and you usually have to do it in the first year of a coach's tenure. It's very difficult when you're trying to do that 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 years into it. Look at Jeff Fisher. A perfect example. Okay, we're going to do this with our first-round pick, and we're going to trade up and get it, and we believe in it. Well, can you last that long when you're year 4 and 5 and had a winning season with it yet? When we won the Super Bowl back then, Tiki, and I would say Tampa after that, and even New England at the same time, it was a different time. We were void of great quarterback play. Taking nothing away from that string of quarterbacks, we had to go through Brian Griese, Steve McNair, God rest his soul, but he was in our division. We knew how to play him.
Yeah.
Rich Gannon, who at that point was handing the ball off to the number 1 running offense in Oakland, and then and Kerry Collins in New York. Again, good, solid quarterback, but not necessarily an elite upper level quarterback. Those are the guys we had to go through. You got to go through last year, a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady, a Drew Brees, a Ben Roethlisberger. You got to go through a litany of pretty good quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl in today's game. And so you don't have to necessarily have a Hall of Famer, but you got to have a guy that can play at that upper level of the NFL. And to sustain yourself as well, because your roster is going to go through transition. And if you can hold on to the fact that you've got that quarterback position solidified, that gives you a lot of latitude, even in the years when maybe you're off a little bit in terms of your talent level.
Now, Brian, something that went down a couple of months ago, and your job as an analyst is to do this and deliver, honest, poignant stuff. And it was pretty honest, and it's proven to be pretty poignant, where you basically said that the Browns aren't going to win a game. That was your prediction. And Hugh Jackson, volleyed back, and it's his team, but of course he's got to do that. Not that you take great joy in this, but is there a sense of vindication that it looks like you might very well be right? They're 0-13.
And a lot of people have brought that up, and we all do this. You go into the season, you got to say, who do I think's good, who do I think's bad? And as I said at the time, and it did kind of stir it up, and I understand that. It's just, it is what it is. And I don't take any joy in saying the Cleveland Browns are any good. And I never said anybody would go 0-16. I would never predict that any more than I'd predict anybody go 16-0. It's just statistically improbable. But in going through it and reviewing, I said, I just don't know where they get a win. I don't see a win on their schedule. I don't see a game where they're even going to be favored. Now, that appeared to be right now. And again, I take no joy in that. The challenge for Cleveland right now is holding that thing together and I have some opinions on, the way they're going about it. They got Brad Pitt and Jonas Hill running the organization, and they're going to go the Moneyball route. Okay, that's fine. And I'd stick with it because you got to be all in. The difficulty for Hugh Jackson in the way they're going about it now is, let's say they do finish 0-16. All right, you're going to add to the talent in the off season, and you're going to ramp this thing up, and now we're going at it. And if you can win your first game or two, then all that goes away. That's phenomenal. But if you open the season next year 0-2, and maybe it's because it's just the schedule makes it difficult for you because you're playing two really good. Let's say you're going to open up with Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and that's just the way the schedule falls. And now you're 0-2 after coming off 0-16 as a coach. That is a hard thing to hold on. Hey, guys, hang in with this. We're going to get better. We're a good team. okay, Coach, what do I base that on?
Yeah.
And this is a tough place to be in.
It is very, very undesirable. It's a tough spot. But, he knew what he signed up for, Hugh Jackson. I want to ask you something about another coach in that division, and that's Marvin Lewis, who, I think over the years, and whether people think he's a really good coach, and personally, with all due respect, I don't, but I certainly know that he's competent. He's not an abject failure, although in the postseason he has been. But I do think, Brian, what's really happened here is that he's lost a lot of smart men. And Hugh Jackson's one of them as an OC, and Jay Gruden. I almost feel like they lost some receivers too, but I feel like the coordinator losses it's shined a light on Marvin Lewis, and he hasn't shown the acumen to fight through it. Is this time for them to make a change?
It's always tough once you get to that 10-year mark or beyond. And obviously, I'm a fan of Marvin Lewis. He coached for me in Baltimore. I think he's an outstanding coach. You don't want to believe this as a coach, but I think there is a time where the tenure at a given place can Bill Walsh was very much the believer. You can't last more than 10 years. And that's very few exceptions to that. Bill Cowher was out of the playoffs in years 7, 8, and 9. And in most instances, that would have been you're out. But typical Pittsburgh, they stuck with him, and they came out of it with double-digit wins, and he ended up winning a Super Bowl. Andy Reid and Jeff Fisher, lasted beyond that, and it usually has to do with the transition to quarterback. And it didn't turn out well, but then they go someplace else because they're good coaches. Andy Reid shows he is a good coach and has done a great job in Kansas City. Jeff Fisher obviously struggled in St. Louis. So there's no absolute to this, but sometimes there has to be change just for change, both for the organization and the coach. They can get a different coach than Marvin Lewis. They're not going to get better, in my opinion, but they can get a different one. And sometimes maybe that's what you have to do because after a while, it's when you lose players, when you lose coaches, that's the challenge of a coach to make that transition and to bring in good people. When he lost to Jay Gruden, he brought in a Hugh Jackson, which ended up being pretty good.
Yeah.
But occasionally, sometimes it doesn't go quite that well in that transition. So. Unfortunately, in Cincinnati, and I think they don't want to because they realize what a great job he has done there. Sometimes change has to happen for change's sake.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Now, if you're going to go to any game in the National Football League, what you're going to talk to us about is important, except for the Los Angeles Rams where seats are available. But what can you do with SeatGeek, Coach?
Oh, that's where you need to be. You want any ticket, whether it's in the sports, you want to go NBA, you want to go hockey, you want to go football, or even if you want to go see one of your favorite plays, you got to go to SeatGeek.com. Largest inventory of secondary market for tickets. You go to the SeatGeek app. They got a thing called Deal Score. It tells you exactly what you're paying for the ticket,